We now arrive at Elliotts Conundrum. First of all, what is a conundrum? What's a conundrum? It's a problem. Now, would that be a difficult problem or an easy problem? A difficult problem. So a difficult problem, a difficult puzzle, a difficult challenge. A problem that we may have been beating our heads against the wall for a decade or so, yet a problem that if we could solve it, it might change the landscape of everything. This was Elliott's conundrum. What is it that makes a person's role in the organization different from another person's role? Now, Elliott was confronted with this conundrum in 1952. He was working as a consultant for the Glacier Metals Company in London, England. The Glacier Metals Company was a precision ball bearing manufacturer. Precision ball bearings that were used in components and equipment around the world. Now, Elliott was a clinical psychologist. In the morning, he saw patients. In the afternoon, he worked with organizations. He was sitting in his office after lunch. He was approached by a group of Stratum 1 production workers. His production workers came up to him and they said, "Doc," because that's what they called him. "Doc, we have a question for you. We're just curious. You know, we come to work every day dressed in our dungarees. We've brushed most of the dirt and grime off from the day before. We wear safety glasses to protect our eyes. We have hard hats to protect our heads. Each day we come out to the production floor, we get our work orders for the day. We step out onto the production floor, and during our shift we create our quota of ball bearings. At the end of our shift, we step off the production floor with our quota, and for that work we get paid a certain amount of money. Now, over on the edge of our production floor in an air-conditioned office sits our engineering supervisor. Not exactly sure what he does in there all day, but as we look through the window, we can see he has a pair of dungarees just like ours, but his are clean and pressed. Now, he has safety glasses, but his are the designer safety glasses, and his hard hat doesn't have a single mark or scratch on it because the only time he puts it on is when he ducks his head out in the morning to count the guys coming in on the shift, and when he ducks his head out in the afternoon to count the guys coming off the shift with their quota of ball bearings. And for that work, whatever it is he does in that office, he gets paid a certain amount of money. As a matter of fact, we know, because we know, he gets paid more money than we do, but we're doing all the work out here on the production floor. We were just curious why. That was Elliott's conundrum. What is it that makes one person's role in the organization different from another person's role? So different that we might actually compensate it differently. So I'm going to let you kick that around for 60 seconds or so, but not 15 minutes. 60 seconds is all you get. What do you think? What is it that makes one person's role in the organization different from another person's role? I heard market scarcity. Sometimes there aren't enough supervisory level people as opposed to production people, which is also a very good guess. Unfortunately, it's not true, and we'll take a look at population statistics in a bit. There are just as many people in the world with supervisory capability as there are with production capability. You know, by now most groups I work with have figured out that the engineer in the air-conditioned office is actually blood related to the CEO, and that's how come he makes the big bucks. Actually, there is an answer to this conundrum. The answer to this conundrum turned out to be the scientific measuring stick for all of Elliott's research for the following 50 years, all the way up until his death in 2003. The scientific measuring stick turns out to be something called time span. Now, time span is defined as the length of time that a person can effectively work into the future without direction, using their own discretionary judgment to achieve a specific goal. The length of time that a person can effectively work into the future without direction, using their own discretionary judgment to achieve a specific goal. Randy, since you were late today, can I pick on you? Now the rest of you owe Randy a favor because you're all thinking, I'm glad he didn't pick on me. I've actually asked Randy to participate with me in a quick delegation exercise. As the CEO of my organization, I've got a lot of stuff on my plate, and I've got a lot of other things that I need to be paying attention to. In fact, if I'm going to pay attention to this new stuff coming down the pike, I've got to get something off my plate. So I have selected a project and I've selected Randy to delegate this project to. So I call Randy into a delegation meeting. We sit down across the conference room table in this delegation meeting. I describe to Randy the vision of what it is I need for him to produce with this project. Also describe to Randy the very specific performance standards that he has to meet when he's working on this project. I also describe to him the specific guidelines that he has to work inside of. Because you see, Randy, you'll have a budget for this project, but it's not an unlimited budget. You're also going to have access to some of our internal resources, but it's not unlimited access. Now, do you have any questions? Now, Randy's a bright guy, right? I need a little more enthusiasm. Randy is a bright guy, right? Yes. So Randy asked me 10 or 12 questions, which I dutifully respond to. But at some point he says, Foster, I think I've got it. He stands up out of his chair. He walks to leave the room. The instant he crosses that threshold, he begins to work into what time frame? The future. Without my direction, because the meeting's over. Using his own what? Discretionary judgment to make decisions and solve problems. Using his own discretionary judgment to achieve a specific what? Now, is it possible I might tiptoe out and peek over his shoulder while he's working on this project? Of course, I'm a manager. I can't help myself. I'm going to go peek over his shoulder. But while I'm peeking over his shoulder, do I expect him to give me the ball back? Do I expect him to drop the ball? Where do I expect him to carry that ball all the way to? To the specific? Is it possible he may come back to me with a clarifying question or two? But during that conversation, do I expect him to give me the ball back? Do I expect him to drop the ball? Where do I expect him to carry that ball all the way to? To the specific? Now, at some point, Randy does come back. It's this time you're going to be very pleased, almost exactly as you described in your vision. We met every single one of the performance standards, and we stayed within the guidelines. So we're all done. What's next? Because you see, now Randy needs something more from me as his manager. He needs more direction. But what Randy has just established for that delegated task, by the way, Randy did a wonderful job in this exercise. Thank you very much. What Randy has just established for this delegated task is the time span. The time span in which he worked into the future, without my direction, using his own discretionary judgment to make decisions and solve problems to achieve a specific goal. Time span becomes the metric by which we can understand the complexity of any delegated task. By identifying the longest time span task inside of a role, we can now understand the complexity of that role. We can also use time span as a metric as we evaluate the effectiveness of people we've assigned to complete those tasks.